Welcome back, Gabby, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so great to have you here again.
It is always good to be with you. You're one of my favorite people to reconnect with randomly. Like you're like one of those like balls of sunshine that when I like randomly get to see you once a year, whether it's on Zoom or in person, it's like this bright light happens inside me. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you. And a question I'd love to ask you again is what makes you your highest self?
Oh, so many things. I would say what makes me my highest self is being authentic and untethered. Authentic
Beautiful.
and untethered. Yeah.
Mm. And I really think right now we are so in need of authentic and untethered voices. You know,
Hmm.
it's so challenging every time we go online and we're not sure what to believe, what's true, what's false, like reading between the lines, and it can sometimes just feel like the greatest breath of fresh air to read something that comes from the heart, and
Yeah.
so many people right now too are have experienced so many challenges and lessons and deeper revelations that they're wanting to share. And that's why I'm so excited to be interviewing you today on writing a book, because it's a question I get by so many listeners of how do I get started writing a book? What does it look like? What is a creative process like? And there's really no one better out there to ask than you, who have, crafted multiple New York Times bestsellers, someone who has deeply inspired me and I feel really paved the way for female spiritual authors. Like, there truly has never been a female spiritual author like you before. And you really are a pave maker who has really allowed us to see what is possible. So, first of all, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for that and just learn more about your writing process. So, the first question I'd love to ask you is how do you get an idea for a book? Is it something that just hits you? Is it kind of the, conglomeration of different lessons you've been learning recently? What does that process look like?
Well, I just actually am laughing to myself before I even answer that question because I've written 9 books in 11 years. And right before I got on with you, I'm in the process of writing a proposal for a cookbook, actually, that I won't be writing the recipes. I'll be writing the spiritual elements of it. But what I find so funny is I'm just sitting here and I'm like, she's asking me what makes me want to write a book. And I'm like in the middle of trying to write the proposal for this next one. So I can answer that with a lot of authenticity in this moment. I will write a book often. There's two reasons. One, based on what I sense the reader needs at that time, given the circumstances of the time, given what I'm intuitively and spiritually being called to bring forth from a timely perspective. And two, I write books based on what I need for my own healing and my own personal growth at that time. Every book I've written has first and foremost been written for myself. I write it as a part of my own recovery and my own spiritual growth and enhancement. The fact that these books heal me allows me to know that they will heal the reader, that they will support and serve the reader.
I love that so much. And when do you get that spark of, yeah, this is going to be a book?
Way too often. So I'm laughing still inside loudly because I was on the phone with my agent. Like I'm talking 5 minutes before we get on. And I'm like, okay, so I'm telling you about the proposal for the cookbook. And then he's like, okay, but when are you going to write your children's book? Because Harper One wants to write a children's book with you. Oh, we can take out Harper One because this publisher wants to write a children's book with you. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I really want to write a children's book. Wait, I got to get that. I've got the biggest idea for that. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, oh yeah, and I've got this book writing course called the Bestseller Masterclass, and I want to write a book writing book. And like, it was just like slow your roll, girl. But that's like in any agent's dream, right? But the answer is I always have a spark of inspiration. My team has to work at the speed of Gabby. I actually have to often slow myself down so that I can not take on too many things at one time.
I love that. And I feel the same way. And then when do you feel like someone needs to have gotten through the lesson to write a book on it? I often see people, they want to write a book about a certain lesson, but can you be in the lesson and write the book, or how far after really completing that lesson do you feel like you're ready to write a book on it?
I think you can be in the lesson while you're writing it, but it really depends on the topic. So, for instance, if it's if it's when I wrote the book, The Universe Has Your Back, I was living in a really, really, really dark period of my life. I had just remembered a dissociated childhood trauma. And then I was contracted to write a book about transforming fear into faith. So, in the process of writing that book, I was healing myself. So, while I was going through it, while I was writing it. And so, I think that was appropriate for that book. Whereas this new book that I'm writing that will be out on 2/22/22, the new book I'm writing is all about undoing the traumas from your past so that you can be standing in your greatness in the present. And that's my book on trauma recovery. And there's no freaking way that I could have written that book 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even, a week before I started, right? I started writing it a year ago. And that was when I was steady enough, when I was healthy enough, when I was grounded enough, when I was in enough recovery, when I knew that my words wouldn't trigger others, or that I could be a safe container to hold the conversation, to keep people safe in that conversation. So the answer sort of has to depend on the topic. If you're like going through a breakup and you want to write your breakup book, like that might be the best time to write your breakup book because you're living it. But if you're unpacking a traumatic wound from childhood that you just remembered after 36 years, you might not want to write that book the first day that you remember. So, yeah.
I love that answer. And when you start writing a book, does it look like you're just kind of like in front of your Microsoft Word and just writing away, or do you put together a table of contents first?
I use the word untethered up front. When I write as an untethered force of light. That's my title at my company. I am not the CEO. I'm the untethered force of light. At the top of the page of every book, I write untethered force of light. The only way I can be untethered and be a force of light as a writer is to have a very detailed outline, and to know where I'm going, and to know the journey that I want to take the reader on, and to know the core message of the book, and to do all that heavy lifting and organization up front so that I can riff between the lines, so that I can be untethered, so I can have fun and be free because I know exactly where I'm going. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to write yourself into circles. There is no freedom in not having a clear outline. It's actually quite the opposite. And this is something I teach to all writers. I have full, in my course, the Bestseller Masterclass, I give a full module just on core message, an entire module just on the outline. Because if you don't have those two, and that's where I start, if you don't have your core message meaning the through line, what is the promise of this book? An example often is the subtitle of a book, right? So, Super Attractor, the core message, methods for manifesting a life beyond your wildest dreams. Okay, I know what she's talking about. If every chapter doesn't connect to that core message, then it has to be used in another book or deleted or whatever. So, the clarity and the organization and the forced organization, frankly, because I'm not the most organized person, but I've taught myself to be, gives me the freedom to be untethered in the writing.
I love that so much, and I can so agree that table of contents helps you move so much faster too. Because I have found when I don't have the table of contents and I'm just writing, I end up, you get on a tangent on one thing and you're like 3 pages into this like one point that feels like the most important point you have to keep writing about, and then you like basically have to get rid of all of it and it ends up being a sentence. So I
Yeah.
would love to talk about killing your darlings. Sometimes as writers we get really precious with our words and we don't want to let go of things. What is that process like to you, to be like, nope, this isn't going to fit in the book? Do you kind of save it in a file for other books? Is that hard for you? What is it like?
Well, I think that the stuff that I need to move is different than my darlings, because the stuff that I need to move is usually good stuff that is like awesome and channeled. And I'm just like, oh, but that just doesn't fit in this book. Save it for the next one, or put it in a blog, or put it in a social media post, or do something with it. But the darlings, oh my God, one of my darlings are like, I always say, I always write, in the times we're living in, we are called to, or like, just my husband's always like, are you kidding me with this stuff, because it's consistent. So I'm very easy to strike through that. I look for it. I find it much more easily now. I think in one of my books, I think I'd written I can't remember what the word was, but my editor found the same word like 99 times or something like that. Like it was something that had to be cut.
Do you ever find the challenge of you're writing and you're like in a specific tone or mood, and then you come back to write and you're in a different tone and mood, and then it sort of feels like a different voice? Do you tend to choose what the tone of the book is going to be like before and consistently write like that, or do you edit that more later on in the process?
I think that because I'm a motivational speaker first and writer second, I don't know why I identify like that because I write so many books, but I do see myself as a speaker first. I always write in my spoken voice, and so the voice doesn't change much. And even if the mood changes, the voice isn't there is the same. And so I think that the my biggest because I don't have any literary background other than writing 9 books, but I haven't had any training, writing training, and traditional publishing training or anything when I was before I wrote my books. I think that was a blessing for me because I found my voice at a very early stage in the process. And so that's consistent for me no matter what.
I love that so much. And do you tend to set like a routine for yourself of I'm going to, create the space and write between these times, or is it more whenever the inspiration hits?
Both. These days it's more routinized because I have a son who's 2.5 years old. And when I was younger and I was writing, I've written, I've pretty much been writing a book a year. So when I was younger and I was writing and I didn't have a child, and as many responsibilities. I would write my book on the airplane of the book tour of the book that I just launched. So I'd be writing the next book. So I would write a book, launch it, sell the next book, and then be on the freaking airplane of the tour writing the next book, which was fine because it was coming out and I had a deadline and I love writing on planes. I do have a little bit of a routine, which is coffee. Mornings are my writing time. I will never write any other time past, usually I don't write past noon. Morning is when I write. It's my best, it's my magic hour, my magic hours. I need to be uninterruptible, as my friend Danny Shapiro says. And as a writer, you have to be uninterruptible because when I write, I just can't have to have all the tabs gone. I am a multitasker, but I am, the more space I clear, the better the writing is.
I feel you. Do you put your phone in another room or on airplane mode, or do you just kind of get in the zone and forget?
I turn off all the other tabs. Like I'm just in one tab. I write in Google Drive and I'm just in the Google Drive tab. So there's no other tabs up. My phone is probably on silent. Yep.
Do you find yourself getting distracted, or do you take breaks throughout the hour, or do you kind of just sit and flow until the muse runs out?
I sit and flow. So I might flow for an hour and then I'm done for the day. Uh, I don't bang my head over the table. I just let it out. I let it out.
I love that so much. And yeah, I think my best writing has always come in those times that it's unforced and it's just
Mm-hmm.
coming
Mm-hmm.
through me. But sometimes to get to that place, it requires a bit of discipline and motivation when you've especially never felt that feeling before. But then eventually I feel like the muse shows up.
Yeah, I think that it's not about how long you're writing for. It's about how free you are when you're writing.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, I want to talk about completing a book. Now, I'm sure a lot of listeners have started writing something but haven't completed it. What do you do to stay on track, stay motivated, stay focused, especially with running a business, having a son, and so many other things in your life?
I am a I am the most n- unorganized, routinized person there is. So I have a lot of routine, but I also have a lot of freedom in that routine. And because of that, I've never missed a deadline. I'm early usually when I drop a book to my publishers. I I think it's sort of also in my nature to be on time. I also find that completion is something that brings me ease. And I don't like some people like to just like do things at the last minute. I like to get shit done. So that's helpful when you have a deadline. Is I stay on track, I'm consistent, I start early, I give myself enough time and space. I know in sort of in an inner clock of like when it needs to get done. Uh, I I for this new book, I wrote most of it like early 2020 at like a crazy time. And then I knew that if I did that, I would have plenty of time to go back and rewrite it, which I have to often do, is like rewrite a lot of it. So I don't miss deadlines. I have no trouble with completion.
Mm. Before you had a publisher and deadlines, was it ever challenging for you, or would you set a deadline for yourself?
I was I just think it was always just in my nature to get stuff done. I think that it's just something that my mom taught me. My mom, and it almost to a fault at the time. Now it's much more balanced, but I think when I was younger, I would get things done because I'd be anxious if I didn't. And so now it's much more just in my nature, and it's just part of my inner clock, and I just make it happen. And it does give me ease to be complete. But I don't. But I do think that when I was younger, it might have been a little bit more destructive.
I feel you. I sometimes feel this sense of like urgency of like something is unfinished. I need to finish the thing. And
Hmm.
yeah, it does
Hmm.
give you a feeling of like relief and satisfaction after. And then there's another thing to write and create. And that's the joy of life.
Totally. Totally.
So, do you ever start writing a book and then realize, maybe this isn't the book I'm meant to write, or maybe this isn't the time I'm meant to write this book later on?
That hasn't happened to me. The opposite has happened to me. I'd be writing a book. Well, maybe it's not quite the opposite. It might be the same thing, sort of. I'd be writing a book, and one of the chapters in the book I'll be writing, and I'll be like, oh shit, this is a book. So that happened with The Universe Has Your Back. I was writing The Universe Has Your Back, and I wrote an entire chapter about releasing judgment. And when I finished that book, I was like, oh, damn it, that's a whole book, which became my next book, which was Judgment Detox. So it's not a bad thing. It's just that I had to recognize that this was a introduction to what was going to become a book later. And that's kind of cool.
I love that. And speaking of judgment, what do you suggest to people who are editing while writing? So they're rereading what they just wrote and kind of in their more analytical mind when writing. What is your process with that?
I would say that's not good for me. I don't know, maybe other people, but what I like to do is get it all out, write it all out, then maybe the next day review it and give it a little bit of a zhuzh and a little bit of a reorg. I also work with an editor in addition to the editor at the publishing house so that I feel like there's somebody just sweeping up behind me. So when I complete a chapter and I've done my own like very light edit on it, then I'll give it to my editor. She'll do a first round edit. Then I'll go on to the next chapter. And then she'll kind of continue to sweep up behind me and we do 3 rounds of edits. Then when I'm done with those 3 rounds of edits, she's given me a complete manuscript. No ghosting. I write every single word of my books. She just does just a reorganization, copy edits, suggestions, things like that. And then I give the full manuscript to my husband Zach, and then he literally just goes and just tears that shit up, and then I have to go deal with his edits. And once I've done that, I bring it to the publisher. So I submit a really clean manuscript.
Mm. So you don't let yourself kind of reread what you just wrote, just kind of briefly after you finish the whole chapter.
Or I'll like write a few thousand words and then I'll go back to it the next day and say, okay, am I on the right track? I may not complete the entire chapter without revisiting it, but sometimes I will.
Mm. And do you ever, or have you ever had a voice in your head as you're writing of like, this isn't even very good, or I'm off today?
Yeah, I'm sure I have. I think that if I'm feeling like that though, I would stop writing. So I wouldn't say that I've ever felt like I'm staying in that place. I never force myself to write.
Mhm.
You can't.
I love that so much. And for people who are thinking about, writing their first book, would you suggest for them to self-publish it, get it out there, or to try to get a traditional publishing deal?
So I cover this in great detail in my bestseller masterclass because I think that a lot of people think they only can get a book out by getting a publishing deal. And what happens is they may not have a platform that's ready for it, or there may be issue with the publishing industry at that time, or whatever. And so they're sitting pretty much waiting there to be picked. And as a result of that, they're sitting on their big mission driven work. So I am a huge fan of teaching people the exact methods for getting an agent and a publisher, but also, most importantly, the exact methods for finding your path to a self publishing journey. Because you can self publish, have a successful book, and have that same book republished years later by a publisher. So it's not like self publish. There's no shame in the game of self publishing, let me tell you. It's something I very well may do at some point in my own career. There's sometimes it can be far more abundant for people. So there, I don't think there's a right or wrong way, but I do believe that if the traditional publishing path is going to hold you up and keep you from putting your book in print, then self-publish.
I love that advice so much. And yeah, I think especially with the paradigm shifting and COVID happening and so many distribution channels not even being open right now, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the very reasons why so many people traditionally published in the past may not even be there right now, of like we're not really walking into a bookstore as much as we used to, or Anthropology or whatever places, that we are buying a lot of things online which you could just self-publish and have it basically look exactly like a book and be exactly on Amazon. Plus, I believe now you can even self publish on Audible and get,
You can, I believe you're right. Yep.
yeah, which is super cool. Do you tend to find that people resonate more with your written book or Audible audiobooks, or is it sort of equal?
My audiobooks are almost sell more than my hardcover at this point, maybe equal. My
Mm,
audiobooks are a lot of people buy both. They like to read it and listen. Because I read my books, because I am a motivational speaker, because of the nature of the books, I think that people really like to listen to them. And also I think Audible is just such a hot thing right now. People really
yeah.
like to listen to books.
Recording my audiobook was one of the hardest things. I thought it was
It
going to be
is
so fun and so
so
easy.
hard. It's so hard.
They were
I've
like,
done
your
it.
stomach rumbled.
It's no small thing. The first time I did it, I remember I was like, "Oh no, I don't think I'm going to make it through." And then I've gotten better as the has gone on.
Do you record them at home now or do you go to a studio?
My last audiobook, which was an Audible original, I recorded. They sent me all the equipment. I recorded it in my home. Yeah, sounds great.
Was that easier?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no, because I was still like zooming the tech side of it. So like I had to set it all up with my husband help me, but like I'd have to set it all up and then test it and like then send them the files. And so no, it actually wasn't easier, but there was some. But I'm building a recording studio in my office, in fact. So for the future, I was just going to bang it out, and maybe I can have somebody there helping me.
Yeah, totally. My friend did it while lying down in her bed, just recorded at home lying down. I'm like, I need to do that next time.
That's a good idea. Mhm.
So I'd love to hear your advice. A lot of people, they have an idea for their first book and it's a memoir, their story. And oftentimes the advice they hear from publishers is it's not a good idea for your first book to be a memoir because people don't know you yet. They may not want to hear your story. So, what is your advice on a first book idea? Should it be something that's more of a guide without a personal story, or would you say just go for it and start with your memoir, given also the challenges of writing about your own personal story?
Well, I think it depends on the type of author you anticipate becoming. For instance, my friend Danny Shapiro, who is a memoirist, it's like her books are memoirs, right? She had to start somewhere. So it's not like she was writing self help books, although they have a lot of deep personal growth in them. So if you're like us and you want to write personal growth, spiritual books or nonfiction, then maybe you don't want to start leading out with a memoir. You do want to kind of qualify yourself as a teacher. But if you're someone that wants to write fiction or wants to write memoirs, then you would have to start there. So it sort of depends on the style of book you intend on, or the style of author you intend on becoming.
Totally. In my experience, writing about my own personal story has always been the most challenging thing because there's so many nuances to it and perspectives, especially when there's other people involved. So, what is your advice on writing about something that maybe has to do with someone else, like a parent or person in your life that you want to share your whole truth, but you also know that that person's going to read it?
Well, either you have permission or you change the name and the sex and make them unrecognizable.
Mm, love that. Yeah, I know for so many people it's hard because you want to share about your childhood and things you overcome, and you maybe don't want your childhood friends and family to know, or you don't want your parents to hear what you really felt about your childhood, or all of these
Mm-hmm.
different things that come with sharing your story.
Listen, the book I'm writing right now, it's like my husband's editing it, and he's just like coming into my office being like, I think I'm depressed. He's like, because it's stories that he's lived through with me, even though if it's not directly connected to him, it's stuff that's triggering for him.
Mhm.
And because it's reminding him of when I was, suicidal with postpartum depression or remembering trauma. It's like really hard shit. So the people in your life may struggle to hear the book. They just might,
Mhm.
what it is. Speaking of stomach growling, my stomach just started growling.
It's always happening. It's just the microphone makes you hear it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I feel you. It was definitely the hardest thing for Discover Your Dharma, sharing about my story with my family, etc. And yeah, like knowing that it's your story to share. And when you're putting something out into the world, it's also involving their perspective. So
That's right. Yeah.
it's it's definitely the greatest healing process I think I've ever gone through, especially with that. Yeah, so much wisdom that can be gained. Do you feel like every time you write a book, you shift as a person?
Yep. Every time I write a book, I shift as a person. Yes. My books
Mm,
heal me. My books teach me. My books challenge me to be a better version of myself. If you're going to put your face on the cover of the Judgment Detox book, you better get your shit together. If you're going to put your face on the top of The Universe Has Your Back, you better stay positive and really believe and practice what you preach. Oh, yeah. Being an
mm.
author is a privilege in that it challenges me to walk my talk.
Yeah, most definitely. I think some of us, we chose to learn lessons by transmuting them and teaching them to others. And then we get another karmic lesson and then we transmute that and, write a book or share about it in some sort of way. And that's just how we're going to live our lives forever.
That's right. That's right.
So, what's your advice for people who feel like maybe I'm not naturally a writer? Do you suggest that they voice record themselves writing a book and then try to edit it later? Do you think it's a learned skill or something that some people are just more born with?
I think that if you have a story to tell, there is a way to express it. I had no literary background. I couldn't string a sentence together. I My first book, I was guided to a writing coach who just taught me how to create an outline. And then that gave me the freedom to write between the lines and be extemporaneous in my writing and just have fun and be joyful with it. That was the beginning for me. So I think if you don't identify as a writer, but you know you have a story to tell, there are many ways to express that story through your writing. And also be, you can also teach yourself, which is my writing is so good now. And it wasn't that great before. It was always good in that it was my voice and it was clear and the messages were strong, but the actual writing is great now. And that took 11 years of
Mhm.
consistent writing. Now I can just sit down, write a book proposal in 5 minutes with a killer intro because I can tell stories well in my writing voice.
I love that. And I know you share more about storytelling tips, et cetera, in your bestseller masterclass, which can't wait to share about more. So, what advice do you have for someone who does want to be a first time author, something that maybe you wish you could have told yourself 10 plus, 20 plus years ago?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have told myself, I probably would have said, actually, I don't know. I wouldn't have advised myself on anything because I think what I did was great. But what I would say to somebody else is just is stay open to creative possibilities because you're going to have all of these stories of doubt and limitation and I shouldn't do this and how can I do this and who am I to do this and I'm not a writer and all the bullshit. So if you stay open to creative possibilities, that kind of attitude will keep you resilient and keep you receptive and keep you inspired and keep you open to finding a coach or getting an editor that's going to help you or even getting a ghostwriter if you're someone who's just like I don't want to write it but I've got a story to tell. So I think there's a lot of ways to get a book out, and you have to just be very open to the possibilities of how you can do it.
I love that so much. And yeah, I mean, I remember when I first was on the journey of writing a book and all the fears and the imposter syndrome and the not enoughness and someone else has already done it, so there's not enough space for me, and it's just showing up on your computer tab and starting to write. And from that process you get more inspiration, you get more feedback, and you refine it and you get better, and then before you know it you have 9 books like yourself and
That's right.
counting.
You wake
So
up
I
and you
love.
got books. Yeah.
Exactly. And it definitely inspires me after Discover Your Dharma. you put so much into a book, and then the book launch and you're like, I'm not writing a book for like at least another year, and then the muse hits and I'm like, oh, I want to write my next book proposal. And it's like this
Mm-hmm.
fun thing of I just love having my thoughts in this physical thing that I can pass along to someone. And like I
Absolutely.
find no course, no thing living online gives me that same gratification that I have knowing you can even access this for free at the library. I am just gifting this to humanity.
I agree with you completely. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, so good. And I'm so excited because you're going to be really training us more into how to create a best selling book. I'm so excited for your training that's coming up in your bestseller masterclass. So, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes. So I know there's countless authors or aspiring authors out there who want to really level up, want to make that commitment, want to go for it, want to get their book out there, want the direction and clarity. Maybe some specific people out there that are like, literally, I want the Gabby playbook. So I created it. I put it into a 6 module course, and it's called the Bestseller Masterclass. And I can very unapologetically and not so humbly say that it's the best course for anyone who wants to write and market a best-selling book. Period. Period. Well, it sounds like a lot of ego, but it's fucking awesome.
Period.
Period. Okay. So that's happening. And so what I wanted to do to introduce that course is I'm giving a free training on your 4 steps to become a bestseller. And that's an hour-long free training, which you can give the links to in your show notes. And then if someone's actually interested in the bestseller masterclass, you can put the link directly to the course in there. I am so passionate about helping people get their stories into print, helping people be bring forth their truth. I am a midwife for books. I have been in the devotional midwifery of many fantastic authors like Amy Porterfield. I'm helping now in her journey, and Chris Carr and Sophia Amoruso, and maybe even you at times. And there's so many beautiful authors that I have had the privilege of supporting because it is a gift I have that I have lived through. I have expressed. I have proven for myself and for the student. And I'm really thrilled that I can share that direct path with anyone who feels that they could use that support. So you can start with the free training and then check out the masterclass. You can go straight to you'll put both links in here, and it's really going to be great.
I love that so much. You know, when I had my idea for my first book, it took me 2 years to even figure out like what's a table of contents? What do I put in it? What do I not? 2 years of me just figuring out that I could have just
Yes.
written like 3 books in that period of time.
And if you take the masterclass, it's like it'll take you 2 weeks because the first week is going to be core message. The second week is going to be outline. We teach you how we help you guide yourself towards your best publishing path. So I've got ebook experts. I've got my longtime agent and publishers. I've got experts in creating book proposals. There's a whole module on how to write a proposal that sells. And then here's the best part in the course is that I give my 6-month marketing plan. So it's like the Gabby playbook is all in there. So that's all in the Bestseller Masterclass digital course. And we're going to have it open for a little while and we'll just let everybody know about it.
Love that so much. So helpful. I mean, I think you're such a great marketer too. And I always just love seeing you show up on so many podcasts and IG lives. And you really just have such a passion for sharing it. And I think so many people out there maybe have written a book, but maybe they didn't do the marketing or they expected, okay, I just hit publish and now, I don't know, people are going to read it. And that's not really how it goes. So I think that that second side of it, of the marketing of the book, it really is just as important as writing it, if not sometimes even more important, because that's what's going to eventually create that word of mouth.
Well, what I say to authors is it's your responsibility to make sure that your great work is read. It's
Yeah.
your responsibility. So you can't just be a great writer and just pretend like nothing happened after that. You have to and so I demystify a lot of the marketing. And like I said, I give a 6-month marketing plan. So I give the step by step path to get people there.
I love that so much. And yeah, I see so many people, they feel the sense of like, oh, well, my publisher should market the book
That's
for
not going to
me. And
happen. No, that's
not
not
going to
going to happen.
happen. And everyone I know who has expected that has ended up, feeling unhappy or even jaded and thinking, book writing is not for me, but it really is your responsibility and it's a privilege because, if you don't want to go out and talk about your book to everyone, then who's going to do that for you?
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Love that so much. So you have your training coming up. I'm going to have that link in the show notes. And if people choose to get the bestseller masterclass, which I totally recommend, I have a free bonus available for you. So I am actually creating a meditation specifically for unlocking your creativity in the book writing process. So if you're someone that's like, I know I want to write, but I just can't get into the zone, I get really distracted, I'm going to be guiding you to a meditation that you can play before you show up for your writing every single day to get you embodied, grounded, and ready to receive that channel going through you. So be sure to use the links in my show notes so you can get access to that. Yay. Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Gabby. I learned so much and it really has re-inspired me to write this book that has been on my heart, and I'm like, maybe I should wait longer until after Discover Your Dharma is out. I'm like, no, I'm going to start writing that
Just
proposal
get
right after
writing.
this.
Go, girl. Yes, today.
Yes.
Awesome. I love you. It's so cool to do this.
Yes, and thank you for being an inspiration for all of us. We're so grateful. Yay!